Hey guys, Myles here at Tactical Hyve, and it is Monday, so it is another dry fire day. And if you've been following the previous videos, I talked about how we're going to do a recap of everything we've covered regarding trigger control. So if you haven't followed our series or you want a reminder about everything, stay tuned. There's been a lot that we've covered regarding trigger control in the past few weeks. So if you're new to this series, please make sure to take a look at the playlist below, watch all those videos, then this recap will make a lot more sense. For those of you who've been following along, we covered a lot of great details when it comes to principles and some concepts and some techniques that are really going to help you improve your speed and your accuracy. As we dive into today's dry fire session, what's really going to be helpful is having the dry fire mag. Remember, that's going to allow you to take multiple shots without having to rack the slide, and you can have the feel, a similar feel to your own trigger, particularly if you tune the dry fire mag properly. So it's like you're using your actual firearm. So what did we cover? We started off with the two major principles of trigger control, and that is isolating your trigger finger, just moving your trigger finger when you break the shot, and moving your trigger finger straight to the rear. In the beginning of this series, we talked about one trigger manipulation. That's the prep press or reset prep, depending on who you talk to. And I started off with that because it's a very simple way and easy way after you practice to get your shots on target. But not everyone is going to be able to use that trigger manipulation. And also in a defensive situation, we talked about a few weeks ago how you're probably going to have your finger here. You're probably not going to have time to have prepped your trigger yet. Or you're walking around here, you don't know if there's a threat yet. And it can be dangerous to prep your trigger. If something pops out, surprises you, might break a shot. And let's say it's a family member or a friend, right? You don't want to do that. So that prep press or the reset prep was just to kind of get you familiar with your trigger, get your shots on target. Now, as we move forward, we are talking about, we have to consider other trigger manipulations. There are three more that I know of. Okay, so there is slapping, there is rolling, there is the prep press or reset and prep, which we talked about early in this series, and then staging, okay, which we haven't really talked about that much. The principles that we covered apply to every trigger manipulation. So it does not matter if you slapping the trigger, if you do the reset prep, if you follow the principles, your shots will be on target. And that is the whole goal of trigger control. The purpose of proper trigger manipulations is to break your shot, squeeze the trigger, while not disrupting your sights so that your bullet goes where you've been aiming or where you intended it to go. Okay? So the two principles there are all about isolating the trigger finger and moving it straight to the rear. Now, what can you do? We've already covered a lot of the exercises, and we'll link to the specific videos up here or down there in the description. But today's dry fire session is all about just isolating again, hyper focus. You can pick any targets you want in your home or whatever it is, and you can do this from the holster, but every series of reps or every set that you do, you're going to just hyper focus on one of those principles. So it might be, the first one might be, okay, maybe from its high ready or from the draw, it might just be move just the trigger finger, okay? Nothing else, because if you move something else, you could disrupt your shot. So it just might be, okay, move just my trigger finger. Maybe a single shot, maybe two shots, however many you want, then do another rep. We are ingraining these good habits. That's what we're doing. We're reinforcing. Okay, that's what dry fire is about. That's what practice is about. You got to do it over and over and over again so you can build it into your subconscious. Yes, we have covered it, but this is why it's a recap. And this is why I want you to do this dry fire so that you can, again, reinforce it. After you do the first principle, just moving just the trigger finger, now you are going to remind yourself in these next sets to just move it straight to the rear. So yes, everything is going to look the same. This looks exactly the same as when I first started my first rep or first set was just moving my trigger finger. This is going to look exactly the same, but now my mental focus is straight to the rear, like I was trying to tell someone to come here or I was trying to touch my nose. Okay, so you're combining those two principles. And remember, if you use those principles, any trigger manipulation, you're going to do well. And let me just say that if you master those principles without prepping your trigger, without going to the wall, without taking up the slack, then what do you think is going to happen when you actually take up the slack, when you go to the wall? Your shots are going to be so much more accurate. Okay, so remember that. Just keep that in mind, follow the principles. So when you work those two principles, just isolate them, do a number of reps and sets, and then move on when you're comfortable. How do you know if you're doing it right? Remember, look at your sights and your red dot. If there's disruption, you know that something is off, and that might mean you have to pay more attention to using the proper mechanics, or maybe something else is broken. Maybe you have an unstable platform, so on and so forth. Then we covered two concepts, which are very important to trigger control and really squeezing that shot, making sure you're fast and accurate. And that is constant speed, minimal effort. We talked about constant speed. So if you are, doesn't matter what trigger manipulation is, slapping, reset and prep, whatever it is, but if I start at, I'm just gonna make this up, 10 miles per hour, then stay at 10 miles per hour. Don't automatically go up to 20 miles per hour or anything like that, because anytime you change your speed, there's the opportunity of disrupting your sights, and your shot's not gonna hit where you want, okay? So that is constant speed. To work constant speed, all you're gonna do is same thing. Everything looks the same again, okay? Everything's gonna look the same as working the principles, but now I'm trying to pay attention to the speed of my trigger squeeze. Am I adjusting it in mid-stride or whatever it is? You need a hyper focus. You be the judge. And while you're doing that, you need to gauge your accuracy by paying attention to your sights or your red dot. The last concept was minimal effort. So if you have a 6-pound trigger, how much pressure should you be putting on the trigger? Only a little bit more than 6 pounds. If you have a 6-pound trigger and you put 20 pounds, you could inadvertently shank your shot, right? So that's something where you need to try to build that muscle memory, so to speak, where if you have a 6-pound trigger, you want just 6 pounds, a little bit more than 6 pounds to break the shot, right? As we work this dry fire, the same thing goes. After you work on a few sets of constant speed, now you're going to work on a few sets of minimal effort. So as I'm doing my dry fire, I'm paying attention to whether or not I'm putting too much pressure, or obviously if it's too light, you're not gonna break the shot, okay? So with the dry fire mag, you'll know because it wouldn't click, okay, if it's too light. If you're putting too much pressure, what might happen, the sights might shake, and then you know you're not accurate. So those were the 4 key things we discussed in our trigger control segment. And then last week, what we did is we chilled it a little bit together by doing reps that work everything. So at first, okay, so for this dry fire session, you're going to isolate each principle, then isolate each concept, and at the end, you're going to combine everything, okay? We're gonna start from the index position and just slap the trigger. So from here, we're not prepping it. I might be here, from the draw, wherever it is, and I might do a few sets of this. You can do as many reps as you want, and from here, what I'm doing is I am now gauging my speed of my trigger pull, okay? The trigger squeeze here, as well as the accuracy. And I have to do it from the index position and slap right through. If there's any disruption in my sights, that means I am not following the 2 principles and the 2 concepts. Or it could mean you're fatigued. You might need a rest. Maybe you're shaky here. Okay, so this is your judge. Your sights are your red dot. So I'm here, constantly looking to make sure there's no disruption in my sights. And when I'm done, index position, and right now I'm slapping. Remember, I am not taking up any slack. I am not going to the wall, none of that stuff, okay? Remember, because if you're in an altercation, you're probably gonna be surprised. If you're walking around your house, you're just gonna slap the trigger. But don't worry, if you follow the principles and the concepts, your shots will be on target. And just a reminder, if you master that, now imagine shooting from the wall, a fully prepped trigger. You're gonna be very accurate. So work all those concepts, the principles, techniques, do a 15, 20, 30-minute dry fire session, however long you want. But remember, the whole theme of this series is to hyper-focus. Only at the end, only after you become proficient with each little component, then you combine it. Just like I talked about the last exercise, we're combining everything now. And our focus now is just on overall accuracy as we follow everything we've taught in regards to trigger control. So the 2 principles and the 2 concepts. Okay, so that wraps up today's dry fire session. There's nothing new here. It's all about reinforcement. And for those of you who maybe needed to hear this again, maybe some light bulbs are turning on or it's a reminder, do the dry fire 3 times this week, and it'll prepare you for the live fire session, which is also going to be a recap just for now shooting live rounds. That's going to be on Thursday. So I'll see you guys on Thursday. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. See you guys.